Okay, so lesson 10 is renew your mind. And as I was saying in the announcements, I think out of all of the classes, if I had to pick one to teach, and I had an hour and 15 minutes with you, and that was all I would get, lesson 10 is the lesson I would pick out of all of them. And I don't want to minimize the benefit of the other classes, and we've already had all kinds of positive feedback about the changes, the positive changes that have happened in your lives while implementing the other classes. But I'm hoping that I'm able to drive home today how absolutely 100% important the concept of mind and body is in this conversation of health, wellness, energy, and happiness in life, and how important your thought life is when it comes to the actual health of your body. Okay? So let's start out with a little bit. Joe Dispenza is, he's a chiropractor. He's also studied neurology throughout his professional career, written several very, very complex books on neuroscience, and has the Evolve Your Brain book was a very, very helpful book in bringing together the concepts and the development that has happened and taken place in neuroscience over the past 15 and 20 years, and actually bringing it to the public and helping people understand what it means. So how your mind can be your greatest asset in health. Whether we like it or not, once a thought happens in the brain, the rest is history. All of the bodily reactions that occur from both our intentional and unintentional thinking unfold behind the scenes of our awareness or our consciousness. When you come right down to it, it is startling to realize how influential and extensive the effects of one or two conscious or unconscious thoughts can be. Basically, what Dr. Dispenza is saying here is once you have a thought, whether it's a knee-jerk reaction to something or whether you think something through and you process it through your brain and it's conscious, it absolutely 100% turns into biology in your body. There is no thought that you can have that doesn't physiologically affect your structure. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make sure that you understand that. So the purpose of Lesson 10 is to help you understand that the mind and brain are not designed to break down or slow down over your lifetime, and that you can stop and reverse cognitive degeneration as soon as you employ the methods in this lesson. We have been led to believe that dementia and this breakdown and loss of memory and loss of balance and loss of coordination, all of this stuff is just part of getting older. And if you learn one thing in this lesson, I hope that I'm able to convince you otherwise. So we'll just start out very basic. We'll start out with kind of the definitions of some of the organs and things that we're going to be talking about. So the definition of the brain is the mass of nerve tissue that regulates all physical and mental activity. It's continuous with the spinal cord, so there is no disconnection between the brain and the spinal cord. All right? So we all know of the brain as that physical mass. Does everyone realize that we've never found the mind in the brain? A very, very interesting concept in science is that the mind, and we'll see the definition of the mind here in just a second, the mind is this thing that science cannot grasp. It can't get its hands on it. We can only see it bounce around in the brain by reading brain activity. And there's all these theories about what comes first, the mind or the brain. Okay? So we'll have a little bit of fun with that this time around too, and you can come to your own conclusion at the end. So weighing about 3.5 pounds in the adult, which is roughly about 2.5% of the body weight, the human brain has 3 parts. Okay? You have a hind brain, and the basic processes that it takes care of are your autonomic system. Okay? It's the things that you do without thinking about it. How many people remember the millions of cells that are created every second out of your bone marrow? All of that happening, those processes, your heart beating, your blood pressure being regulated, all of the hormones that are being produced constantly by your adrenal glands, for example, from your thyroid. Every second, Your hindbrain is operating without you knowing about it, without you being conscious about it, without you feeling it. And it is taking care of billions and billions and billions of signals and messages and coordinating them every second. The hindbrain is a phenomenal place. It is where your habits are stored. It's where your motor functions are stored. You know the program of walking that it was so hard to develop as a kid? You know, you see kids get up and they're all wobbly, and eventually, you know, they're running around 1,000,000 miles an hour. It seems like they go from no speed to full speed. What happens there is that the hindbrain gets that message, starts to develop that walking program, and with merely the intention of walking, the habit takes over, and we're able to walk. So the midbrain connects the two, and the forebrain, which is connected to the hindbrain through the midbrain, the forebrain is the seat of you. Your name here. That's you. That's the receiver of your signal. So it's kind of, this is where we say this is where the mind is. So for me, that's where Jake is in the forebrain. Jake develops habits. Those get kicked back to the hindbrain, and the hindbrain runs the habits. But the forebrain, that's where Jake is. That's where my emotions are. That's where I go through logic. That's where I go through that's where my personality is. So that's kind of the differences in just the basic physiology of the brain itself. So you can see by the picture, you can kind of see where it's all put there. Okay, the prefrontal cortex is that forebrain area, and we'll talk about all the other areas as we go along as well. So the definition of the mind. This is where things get kind of a little. You can tell the scientists don't quite have it pegged yet, or we can't quite figure it out. But the hypothetical faculty that's postulated to account for the ability of conscious beings to think, feel, will, or behave. So the mind is the hypothetical faculty. So it's hypothetical. This is kind of what we think the mind is. Okay? The mind is considered to control or consist of so-called mental processes. Dualist philosophers such as Descartes have distinguished between mind and matter as two totally independent entities. So very early on, they were struggling with the concept of we have no clue how to find this mind. And the best thing that they were talking about in science was that it was somewhere between the gap in between neurons. Have you ever seen neurons, the firing between neurons in the brain? It's in the middle is this vacuum, this gap. It's called a synapse. And for things actually to happen in your body, when you think, electricity basically just jumps synapses. It jumps through open space into the other neuron, and it connects messages and allows you to do things. So we can't actually find the mind, but they say that it's somewhere in the synapse or in the open vacuum, just sitting there, and we can't grab our hands around it. Okay? Idealism suggests that the world is a product of the mind and is dependent on experience. Okay? That's what the whole kind of idealistic community has thought. And then the materialistic community, materialism begins with the concept of material, basically meaning that the brain and mind are one. There is no separation. And the mind is no more than just a bunch of chemicals swimming around in the brain. So you are what the result of the chemicals in your head are. That the brain and the mind, there's no separation. They are the same thing. Okay? So there's one side of the field that says your mind is something completely different from your brain, and we can't quite figure out what it is. And then there's the other side that says your mind is no different from your brain. Your brain is all there is. And the chemicals that are swimming around in your brain are what make up your personality. You don't have control of who you become. Does that make sense? That's what materialism is. Okay? I don't really buy that. And after you see all the science that we've figured out here in the past couple decades, you'll find it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense either. But there are still many, many prestigious PhDs who stick to that story. And they have stacks and stacks of research to back it up. So it's good to know there are opposing views on this. So what's the definition of consciousness? This is important now, because consciousness is about, it's about the things that you process, the things that you're aware of. Can we all agree that there's a lot of things going on in our body right now that we are not aware of? You do not understand what's going. You couldn't possibly try to plan it out or think it through. If you had to think about controlling your blood pressure literally for 10 minutes, it'd blow your mind. It's impossible. So consciousness would be relating to the function of the mind through which one is aware of mental experiences such as perceptions, thoughts, emotions, and wishes. This is where you think, this is where you process things, okay, where you're alert. The subconscious. So we have the conscious mind. This is where you're thinking and you're aware of everything that's going on. The subconscious mind would be concerning the part of the mind of which one is not fully aware, but which influences one's reactions and feelings. What this means is that your conscious mind, your forebrain, as you think and process and you emote, as you have emotions through life, what happens is you develop beliefs and perceptions and habits that get programmed into the subconscious, almost like a tape player. Like you have a little cassette tape that gets plugged in for your walking program. And this is where your walking program, and that's your cassette tape. And there it is. You consciously had to think about it at one point in time in your life. Now you don't. Has anyone ever driven somewhere and gotten there and been like, did I stop at the 2 or 3 stop signs? Like, I can remember the one, but was I paying attention? Anyone just kind of got somewhere and was like, whoa, where was my mind? The reason is because you drove there so many times, you literally didn't need to think about it. Because remember the senses when we talked about the environment lesson? There was wavelengths coming into your senses. Your body took the programs in the subconscious mind, and it drove the car home. While you were thinking about your granddaughter's birthday this weekend and all the things you had to do to get ready for the party. This is the difference between conscious and subconscious. And it's important to realize that both have a very, very, very important part in how your health plays out and how your happiness plays out in life.